A spam message usually doesn't bother me, but the notification from my mother last Tuesday morning was a bitter exception that shattered my peace. My name is Sienna, a 35-year-old financial risk assessment expert living in Naples, Florida, where I spend my days analyzing the stability of multi-million-dollar investments for elite clients. While I was reviewing a complex audit, my phone vibrated with a high-resolution photo showing a stunning beachfront mansion under the golden Florida sun. My mother Joanne appeared in the center of the frame alongside the rest of the family, yet I immediately noticed that my own figure had been crudely cropped out of the happy portrait. Accompanying the image was a chilling text message that stripped away any remaining illusions of maternal love. She wrote that the new house was still short $25,000 and claimed this was my final opportunity to buy back my place within the family circle. I stared at the screen while watching my younger sister Savannah flashing a triumphant smile that signaled my official displacement from the lives I had once funded. Instead of reacting with tears, I maintained my professional composure and carefully took screenshots of the extortion attempt to add to my private files. Those arrogant people have forgotten that my career is built on identifying hidden liabilities, and I have already spent years quietly setting the financial traps that are about to snap shut. If you want to see how I reclaim my justice and force these greedy betrayers to pay the ultimate price for their cruelty, please subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss a single moment of their inevitable downfall. Everything started many years ago when my family stood on the brink of total bankruptcy due to the massive credit card debts my father Marshall had secretly accumulated. At that time, I was just starting my career in finance and watched in horror as the life my parents had built began to crumble under the weight of high-interest loans and unpaid bills. My mother, Joanne, would spend hours crying at the kitchen table while Dad retreated into a shell of stubborn silence, refusing to acknowledge the gravity of the financial hole he had dug for us. Being the responsible oldest daughter, I could not simply stand by and watch them become homeless, despite the resentment I felt for their reckless spending habits. I decided to use every penny of my hard-earned savings and even agreed to co-sign a complex reverse mortgage to secure the old family home. It was a massive financial burden for someone my age to carry, yet I convinced myself that saving my parents' dignity was worth the personal sacrifice. During those stressful years of rebuilding our stability, my younger sister Savannah remained completely detached from the financial struggle, focusing instead on her own social life and superficial ambitions. She soon married my brother-in-law Bentley, a man who shared her obsession with status but possessed absolutely no actual work ethic or financial intelligence. Together, they started pitching various imaginary real estate projects that were nothing more than elaborate schemes to drain more money from Mom and Dad's dwindling accounts. Savannah had a toxic talent for painting vivid pictures of wealth and luxury that my parents desperately wanted to believe in, especially after the trauma of their near bankruptcy. She convinced them that these investments would eventually return 10 times the initial cost, while Bentley nodded along with hollow promises of professional management. I watched from the sidelines as they bled my parents dry, knowing that every dollar they wasted was a dollar I had fought to save through my co-signed agreements. Exhausted by the constant weight of being the family's only financial anchor, I frequently met my best friend Grant at a small quiet cafe to share the heavy burden of supporting people who never seemed truly grateful. Grant sat across from me with a look of deep concern as I described the latest demands for money and the growing arrogance of Savannah and Bentley. He was a sharp legal mind who understood exactly how dangerous my current position was if I didn't establish some firm boundaries immediately. While we sipped our coffee, Grant urged me to restructure our lending agreements with much stricter legal clauses to protect my personal assets in the future. He warned me that blood relatives are often the first to exploit a lack of formal documentation when large sums of money are involved. I listened intently as he explained how these protections would serve as a safety net if Mom and Dad ever decided to act against my best interests under Savannah's poisonous influence. Shortly after those meetings, I began to notice a chilling shift in the way my family treated me whenever I visited the house. Savannah was quietly whispering in the ears of Mom and Dad, slowly convincing them that my oversight of their finances was a direct insult to their personal freedom and maturity. She framed my protective measures as a form of cold-hearted control, making it seem as though I enjoyed holding my financial power over their heads. The family atmosphere turned increasingly toxic as Savannah openly criticized me for being a cold pragmatist who cared more about spreadsheets than family bonds. She painted me as a calculated miser who was intentionally suffocating their dreams just because I wanted to be the one in charge. The rift between us grew wider with every passing week as I realized that my years of sacrifice were being rewritten into a narrative of greed and manipulation. 3 months ago, a property ownership change notification sent to my personal email confirmed my greatest fears that had been lingering in the back of my mind for far too long. I sat frozen at my desk while staring at the official digital document revealing that Mom and Dad had secretly sold the old family home to a private investment group. They executed this massive transaction without obtaining my consent or even giving me a courtesy phone call, despite the fact that I still held the legal co-signing rights and financial guarantees over the property. It became immediately clear that Savannah had orchestrated this entire betrayal behind my back to ensure I had no opportunity to intervene or protect my significant investment. She had successfully convinced our parents to use the entire proceeds from the sale as a massive down payment for a luxury beachfront mansion located in the most expensive district of Naples. To my absolute horror, the legal title for this new multi-million-dollar estate was placed solely under the private ownership of Savannah rather than being shared with our parents. When I tried to contact my family to demand an explanation for this blatant violation of our financial agreements, I discovered that Savannah had already blocked my number on everyone's phones. She had spent weeks poisoning their minds with the lie that I was a greedy manipulator who would try to sabotage their lifelong dreams of high-end living. My sister managed to convince Mom and Dad that I was an obstacle to their happiness, who only cared about keeping them trapped in their old life for my own financial gain. While I was being systematically ghosted by my own flesh and blood, a flood of extravagant images began to saturate Savannah's social media feeds with sickening frequency. She posted endless photos of the sprawling marble entrance and the private infinity pool while boasting about her self-made success and newfound elite status. The captions were filled with delusions of grandeur that made it seem as though she had earned this wealth through hard work instead of stealing it from my years of sacrifice. I sat in my dark office feeling the weight of their combined betrayal while the cold reality of the situation began to settle deep into my bones. Do they really think they can just discard me from the very assets I saved with my own blood and sweat over the last 5 years? I whispered to the empty room as I realized the scale of their ingratitude was far worse than I had ever imagined. Savannah had clearly crossed a dangerous line by dragging our elderly parents into such a high-stakes game of financial fraud that could ruin all of them. Savannah, you have gone way too far this time by involving Mom and Dad in this reckless criminal deception just to satisfy your own vanity, I thought while my professional instincts kicked into high gear. Knowing that I could no longer resolve this matter through emotional appeals or family meetings, I quietly reached out to Grant to begin a comprehensive audit of every legal violation they had committed. We spent several hours reviewing the original mortgage documents and the co-signing protections that I had wisely established upon his earlier professional advice. Grant confirmed that the unauthorized sale of the old home constituted a major breach of contract that gave me the legal standing to pursue significant damages. We began the meticulous process of documenting the fraudulent nature of the new purchase and the suspicious transfer of funds into Savannah's private accounts. I felt a grim sense of determination as we prepared to launch a counterattack that would expose the fragile foundation of their new luxury lifestyle. On the evening of the housewarming party, I drove to the new mansion with the legal file tucked securely inside my personal handbag. I stepped into the gathering amidst a display of artificial grandeur while enduring cold stares from relatives who were busy enjoying the luxury bought with my stolen equity. Every corner of the house radiated a level of opulence that felt hollow, knowing the fraudulent foundation upon which this entire lifestyle was built. My presence seemed to irritate the guests who had been fed a narrative of my supposed selfishness and abandonment of the family. I ignored their judgmental whispers and maintained a professional distance, observing the scene with a calculated eye for detail. It was clear that Savannah and Bentley were working hard to project an image of high society success, despite the looming financial shadows. Before I could even settle into the room, Mom pulled me into a deserted corner of the kitchen and directly demanded that I sign a check for $25,000. She explained with a sense of entitlement that this money was necessary to pay off the outstanding debts owed to the construction contractors who were threatening to walk off the job. I looked at her while she spoke, realizing that she truly believed I owed them this final contribution to maintain their fragile social standing. Her eyes showed no maternal warmth, only the desperate hunger for a lifestyle she could not afford on her own merit. I remained silent while she continued to pressure me, letting her words hang in the air as evidence of their complete lack of remorse. It was a moment of profound clarity where I finally saw my mother as a willing accomplice in Savannah's elaborate deception. As I moved through the crowded living area, I carefully observed Savannah and Bentley as they boasted about their expensive taste and their supposed influence in the Naples real estate market. They were surrounded by luxury items and high-end decor that had clearly been purchased on credit or with the misappropriated funds from my parents' house sale. Savannah approached me in front of several prominent guests and began to mock me for being a mediocre employee who didn't belong in such a prestigious setting. She laughed while suggesting that my simple life in finance was nothing compared to the empire she was building through her innovative property investments. I did not offer any defense or counter-arguments, choosing instead to let her arrogance fuel the recording I was mentally making for my legal case. Bentley stood beside her with a smug expression, nodding along to every insult while sipping expensive champagne that he hadn't actually paid for. I maintained a powerful silence while recording every admission of the property misappropriation that fell from the mouths of my own family members throughout the night. I did not come here to buy back your affection. I came to remind everyone of what was signed in the dark. I stated calmly when the pressure to pay reached its peak. My words caused a sudden chill to descend over the immediate circle as they realized I was not there to play the role of the submissive daughter anymore. I stood my ground while Savannah's face flushed with anger at my refusal to cooperate with their desperate financial demands. That $25,000 will be the final nail in your financial coffin, I added with a tone of cold certainty that left no room for negotiation. I could see the flickers of genuine fear in Bentley's eyes as the weight of my legal threat began to penetrate his wall of superficial confidence. 2 hours after leaving that humiliating party, I sat with Grant in his office to initiate the formal process of asset recovery and legal retribution. I opened my laptop and utilized my professional access to conduct a deep dive into the transaction history associated with my parents' shared accounts. It did not take long to discover that Savannah had been systematically siphoning large sums of money for her own personal expenses and luxury lifestyle. The digital trail clearly showed that she had moved nearly half of the house sale proceeds into a private offshore account that Mom and Dad could not even access. Grant leaned over my shoulder while reviewing the documents and confirmed that selling the original property without resolving my co-signed loan was a severe criminal violation of Florida state law. He explained that this act of financial negligence provided us with the perfect legal leverage to demand an immediate freezing of their current assets. My best friend looked at me with a grim expression while he began drafting the formal complaints that would soon shatter their illusion of security. As we continued our forensic audit of the family's financial mess, I stumbled upon an even more disturbing discovery regarding Bentley and his recent shopping spree. It appeared that Bentley had illegally used Dad's identity and credit profile to act as a guarantor for several high-interest loans used to purchase luxury vehicles and expensive home theater equipment. These loans were structured in a way that left my father entirely liable for the payments, while Bentley enjoyed the benefits of the luxury goods without spending a single dollar of his own money. The level of parasitic behavior within my own family was breathtaking, yet it only served to strengthen my resolve to bring this entire scheme to an end. We spent the remainder of the night completing the legal file with undeniable evidence of fraud, extortion, and multiple breaches of civil contracts by every member involved. The pile of evidence was now so substantial that no amount of lying or manipulation from Savannah could possibly explain away the criminal intent behind their actions. I felt a profound sense of cold detachment as I prepared to finalize the documents that would effectively dismantle my parents' new life in Naples. They chose money over their own daughter, so let the law answer in place of any further explanations from me. I told Grant while signing the final authorization forms. There was no room left for sentimentality or forgiveness after I had seen the sheer scale of their betrayal and the calculated way they had tried to erase me. Grant, please ensure that the asset freeze order is executed immediately before Savannah has any chance to hide the remaining funds in another account. I added with a tone of absolute authority. My best friend nodded while he electronically filed the emergency motions and sent an urgent notification to the bank managing the mortgage for the new mansion. This notification would trigger an automatic internal investigation that would likely result in the immediate suspension of their credit lines and the withdrawal of their financing. The weight of the situation felt heavy in the quiet office, but I knew that these consequences were entirely of their own making through months of greed and deception. I had spent years protecting them from their own poor decisions, but this time I was the one holding them accountable for their crimes against my future. Every signature I placed on those legal papers felt like a step toward regaining the self-respect I had nearly lost while trying to please an ungrateful family. By the time the sun began to rise over the city, the trap was officially set and the legal machinery was moving forward with unstoppable momentum. Savannah and Bentley would soon wake up to a reality where their stolen luxury was nothing more than a temporary dream that was about to turn into a legal nightmare. At 6 o'clock the next morning, the persistent ringing of my phone, filled with furious insults from my father, shattered the silence of my apartment. Dad was screaming into the receiver because he had just discovered that he could no longer withdraw funds to pay the construction crews who were currently surrounding their new mansion. He sounded completely unhinged as he accused me of trying to ruin his life and destroying the only legacy he had left for his old age. I remained perfectly calm while listening to his tirade, waiting for him to exhaust his breath before offering any sort of logical response to his frantic demands. I calmly explained to Dad that he had effectively signed his own financial death warrant the moment he decided to follow the poisonous advice of Savannah. It was his own signature on those fraudulent documents that had triggered the automatic security protocols and the subsequent freezing of every linked bank account. He seemed unable to grasp the reality that his blind trust in his younger daughter had led him directly into a legal and financial abyss. Shortly after I disconnected the call from my father, Savannah called me to deliver a series of desperate threats regarding her intention to sue me for destroying family happiness. She shrieked about how I was intentionally sabotaging her legitimate business interests and interfering with her private property rights through my legal maneuvers. I found it almost pathetic how she still tried to play the role of a successful entrepreneur while her entire world was rapidly crumbling around her. I did not waste my energy arguing with her delusions, as I knew that the evidence we had gathered was more than enough to silence her in a court of law. Savannah's voice was trembling with a mixture of rage and genuine panic because she realized that her access to stolen luxury had been permanently severed. She tried to manipulate my emotions one last time by bringing up our childhood. But those memories held no power over me after the betrayal I had endured. In a move to end their charade once and for all, I publicly shared the screenshots of Mom's extortion messages directly into our extended family's group chat. I wanted every relative to see the cold reality of how my parents had tried to sell my place in the family for $25,000. The chat remained silent for several minutes as the members processed the undeniable proof of Joanne's greed and the calculated nature of their deception. By exposing their true faces, I ensured that they could no longer play the role of the innocent victims to gain sympathy from our community. I felt a sense of relief as the lies they had spent months constructing were finally dismantled by the simple truth of their own words. The narrative of the ungrateful daughter was replaced by the reality of a family that had collectively chosen to prey upon their most responsible member. Meanwhile, the situation at the new mansion began to turn even more chaotic as the construction contractors realized they would not be receiving their scheduled payments. They immediately began to withdraw their crews and threatened to dismantle the high-end installations that had not yet been fully settled. The once glittering mansion quickly became a scene of desolation as expensive materials were hauled away, and the unfinished work left the structure looking like a ruin. Dad, this is not an act of revenge. This is the inevitable consequence of betraying the only person who actually tried to save you, I told him when he called back, in a state of total despair. I could hear the sounds of shouting in the background as the reality of their situation finally began to sink in for everyone involved. Savannah, you should be much more worried about the upcoming court summons than wasting your breath screaming at me over the phone right now, I added, before hanging up for the final time that morning. 1 week later, I stood across the street to witness the grim sight of law enforcement officers and bank representatives executing their duties at that once splendid mansion. The bank had officially moved to foreclose on the property due to multiple violations of the truth in lending terms within the original loan application that Savannah had brazenly falsified. It was a cold moment of reality for everyone involved as the authorities began placing orange seizure notices on the grand entrance that had hosted a party only days before. I watched from a distance while the artificial world my family had tried to build crumbled under the weight of their own criminal dishonesty and greed. The investigation I had initiated with Grant's help had successfully exposed the fraudulent signatures and the misappropriation of funds that had been used to secure the high-end financing. There was no longer any room for negotiation or excuses as the legal machinery worked to reclaim what had been stolen from my equity and my future. Mom and Dad were forced to pack their personal belongings in a state of absolute shock when they finally realized that Savannah had never intended to include their names on any ownership documents. They stood on the sidewalk with a few suitcases while the realization sank in that they had sold their only home for a dream that didn't even belong to them. My mother, Joanne, looked around in desperation as the moving crews began hauling away the designer furniture that had not yet been fully paid for by their failing business ventures. My father, Marshall, seemed to age 10 years in a single morning as he stood silently beside the boxes that contained the remnants of their pride. It was a heartbreaking scene, yet I had to remind myself that they had willingly participated in the scheme to push me out of their lives for the sake of this luxury. While the chaos unfolded on the lawn, Bentley quickly finished packing his own bags and quietly slipped away in the luxury car that still carried a massive, unpaid balance. He did not offer a single word of comfort to Savannah, who was currently collapsed on the driveway and screaming in total despair as her empire vanished. Bentley showed his true character by abandoning the family the moment the financial benefits stopped flowing and the legal consequences became too real to ignore. Savannah watched him drive away while she begged the officers for more time, but her pleas fell on deaf ears as the locks were systematically changed. Her desperate cries filled the air, yet they sounded more like the sounds of a defeated predator than a victim of unfortunate circumstances. I eventually crossed the street to face my parents directly at the gates of the mansion, where they immediately began to beg for my help to pay off the massive debts surrounding them. Everyone said that only successful people deserve to be here, so now you should prove that by handling this on your own. I told them with a voice that remained steady despite their emotional appeals. They looked at me with eyes full of false regret, hoping that I would once again step in to save them from the consequences of their reckless choices. I stood my ground while refusing to offer any financial assistance or a place to stay after the way they had treated me throughout this ordeal. Do not call me your daughter anymore, because that bond was permanently severed by the very message Mom sent demanding money for my place in this family. I added, while turning away from their reaching hands. By the end of the day, Savannah was informed that her real estate broker license had been officially revoked due to the fraud allegations and forged client signatures I had uncovered during my audit. She was now facing a future of legal battles and professional ruin that no amount of social media posturing could ever repair. I felt a strange sense of peace as I drove away from the wreckage of their lives, knowing that I had finally reclaimed my own freedom from their toxic influence. The lesson they had tried to teach me about the value of family had been turned back upon them with devastating precision. Currently, as I sit in my quiet apartment overlooking the Naples coastline, I feel a profound sense of freedom that I had lost for a very long time. The weight of family expectations and financial manipulation has finally lifted, leaving me with a clear mind and a peaceful heart. Mom and Dad are now living in a tiny, cramped rental apartment while relying on their meager Social Security benefits because their credit scores were completely destroyed by the foreclosure. They no longer have the luxury of grand mansions or designer furniture to mask the reality of their poor decisions and past betrayals. It is a stark contrast to the life they tried to steal from me, yet it is the only life they can afford after the legal system finished processing their various financial violations. I sometimes think about the old house we once shared, but those memories are now overshadowed by the coldness they showed when money was on the line. Savannah is still struggling with several ongoing civil lawsuits and discovered that no one in the Florida real estate industry will ever dare to work with her again. Her reputation has been permanently tarnished by the fraud allegations and the public exposure of her calculated attempts to swindle her own flesh and blood. She spends her days dealing with lawyers and court dates, instead of posting fake success stories on her now abandoned social media profiles. I have officially completed the transfer of every asset related to our previous disputes and have severed all communication channels with those who are no longer my family. Every blocked number and deleted email represents a step toward a future where I am no longer a target for their insatiable greed. My new life focuses on my professional career and building sincere relationships where a person's value is never measured by the size of their bank account. I have surrounded myself with people who respect my boundaries and appreciate me for who I am, rather than what I can provide for them financially. The price paid by those who betrayed me was entirely deserved and realistic, reflecting the natural law of consequences within the American financial system. There is a certain grim satisfaction in knowing that the justice I sought was delivered through the very laws they tried to circumvent. I am finally moving forward with a sense of purpose that is not dictated by the toxic needs of people who viewed me as nothing more than an ATM. This story serves as a vital wake-up call about the absolute necessity of establishing firm boundaries within our kindness and staying vigilant against unreasonable family pressures. It is far too easy to let the bond of blood blind us to the reality of exploitation until our own financial and emotional security is completely compromised. We must learn that being a supportive family member does not mean allowing ourselves to be used as a tool for the greed or irresponsibility of others. True love should never be conditional upon a financial transaction or the constant sacrifice of one's hard-earned future for the sake of another's vanity. Always protect your peace and your assets with the same intensity that others might use to try and take them away from you in the name of family loyalty. Thank you so much for listening until the very last moments of this turbulent and emotional journey through my family's betrayal. I truly appreciate your ongoing support and would love to hear your personal perspectives on this situation in the comments section below. Do you think I was too harsh, or was this the only way to finally reclaim my life from such toxic manipulation? Before wrapping up today's story, I have a few thoughts I'd like to share with you. Don't click away just yet, because Sienna's story isn't just a dramatic script, it's a costly lesson about the boundaries of kindness. From my perspective, the biggest mistake Sienna's parents made was treating family ties like a commodity to be bargained with, while Savannah allowed greed to completely cloud her judgment. My stance is clear. Filial piety must go hand in hand with alertness, and family should never be used as an excuse for us to accept unreasonable financial exploitation. If you were in Sienna's shoes, would you have the courage to cut ties completely like she did? Or do you have a different approach that is more humane yet still firm enough to be a deterrent? Thank you so much for listening until the very end. I truly appreciate your support. If you have any thoughts or a different way of handling this, please leave a comment below so we can discuss it.